All right, lot to get through. Joining us for latest radio 2GB host Michael McLaren and Herald economist Patrick Carline. Michael and Patrick, welcome. You probably heard enough out of me in terms of that editorial. This is all an attempt to mop up that decision from the High Court last week, but it's been made so much worse today, I think, by a government that not only flat-footed in their response, Michael McLaren, but slow. And what staggers me is this revelation that none of these people, none of these 84 out in the community now will be locked up after this legislation passes, if it does, through the Senate. But we could have another 340 foreign criminals let out.
Yeah, Peter, they were strong words at the start and I commend you for them. I think you're speaking what you said there, really what a lot of Australians will be thinking, and probably just quietly what some in even the government are thinking how the hell did it come to this? But I mean, there's been a lot of discussion in the last 48 hours or so about Peter Dutton's attack on the government on this, as well as his criticism against Albanese for America on his government's approach to anti-Semitism. Whether there's a connection there or not, I don't know. But what I would say is there is a connection, I think, really, between the voice debate and this, because I think, is this not another example of government and government ministers distracted, certainly over the last 5 months in this circumstance, with the voice, trying to get that across the line? That was the be-all and end-all. That was the litmus test of the government's ability to prosecute a case. Clearly things were missed, and this is one hell of a miss. As you said, it's not as if the High Court decision was necessarily a surprise. It certainly wasn't as if the High Court deciding when it did hand down its findings that the timing was a surprise. This has been a case before the court, I believe, at least 5 months. And as you say, you're quite right, when these things go before the court, you've got to prepare for a negative outcome as much as be ready to celebrate continuity with a positive outcome. So clearly there was nowhere near.
The Albanese government tried to keep tabs on released immigration detainees, people convicted of murder, sexual offences and violent assault, using ankle bracelets and curfews. The High Court just ruled that unconstitutional. And the Home Affairs Minister's response was essentially, well, ankle bracelets were never really the point anyway. That is the kind of spin that requires an Olympic-level mental gymnastics routine, and frankly, the judges were not impressed either. If you want straight talk on stories like this, no filter, no spin, subscribe to the Australian Mind and hit that notifications bell. We cover what others dance around. Let us start from the beginning, because the backstory here is as alarming as the headline. This case, EGH 19 versus Commonwealth of Australia, centred on a man from Papua New Guinea who was convicted of murder and served a lengthy prison sentence. After his release, he was placed on a bridging R visa and let out into the community, but with conditions, including electronic monitoring and a curfew. Seems reasonable, right? Convicted murderer, out in the suburbs, government wants to know where he is at night. Most Australians would call that basic common sense. The High Court, in a unanimous decision, called it unconstitutional. The court's reasoning was precise. Conditions of that nature, ankle bracelets, curfews, electronic surveillance, are punitive in character. They resemble punishment. And under Australia's constitutional framework, punishment can only be imposed by a court, not by an immigration minister sitting in an office signing off on administrative regulations. Chief Justice Stephen Gageler and Justice Gleeson were explicit. The executive government had overstepped its lane, and the measures had to go. Now, here's where the story gets layers you need to understand, because this is not the first time this government has been slapped down on exactly this issue. Back in 2024, similar monitoring measures were already struck down by the courts. Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke responded by introducing new regulations, the so-called Community Protection Test, which allowed the minister to reimpose curfews and ankle monitoring on individuals who posed a substantial risk of seriously harming the Australian community. The government essentially tried to rebuild the same structure with slightly different bricks. The High Court looked at it, knocked it down again, and said the bricks are still the same problem. 79 people were subjected to these monitoring restrictions at the time of the ruling. 43 of them remain in the community right now and will now be placed on mandatory reporting conditions, something closer to bail restrictions. Whether that offers comparable protection to ankle monitoring is a question the government has not answered particularly clearly. And here's why that question matters enormously. This cohort, known as the NZYQ cohort, is not a group of minor visa overstayers. It includes 12 murderers or attempted murderers, 66 sex offenders, 97 people convicted of assault, and 15 domestic violence perpetrators. These individuals were released into the Australian community following a 2023 High Court ruling that found their indefinite detention was unlawful because there was no realistic prospect of deporting them. More than 200 people released in one sweep. Since then, at least one member of the cohort has allegedly committed murder. At least 28 have been charged with federal offences. That is the context in which ankle bracelets were introduced. That is what just got struck down. Tony Burke's response was a masterclass in political deflection. He said the government would have preferred a different outcome, but that the ambition was never about ankle bracelets. What was it about then? He said the goal was always deportation. If someone has their visa cancelled, they should leave the country. Fair enough in principle. The problem is that the entire NZYQ saga exists precisely because deportation was not achievable for these individuals in the first place. That is why they were released. The ankle bracelet was the fallback, and now the fallback is gone. The Nauru deal offers some relief. Burke confirmed that 3 cohort members had been transferred to Nauru under a resettlement agreement. 27 visa approvals have been granted, allowing others to be returned to detention, and another 27 applications are pending Nauru's approval. Progress, yes, but with over 200 individuals originally released and the monitoring regime now dismantled, the arithmetic still leaves a significant gap between the government's assurances and the reality on the ground. The High Court has spoken twice now, the government has lost twice, and Australians living in communities alongside this cohort are the ones absorbing the consequences of every legal defeat. Burke says they are determined to achieve deportation. The courts keep removing every tool short of it. Thanks for watching. We truly appreciate your support.